Hello everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. I have something really interesting to talk about today. Well, I think I have something interesting to talk about every Tuesday and Thursday. That might be not your opinion, but in any case, according to a recent review of 77 studies, adopting a plant-based diet improves both cardiovascular health and recovery time for endurance athletes. There are many other benefits too. For example, plant-based diets are concentrated sources of antioxidants, which can help to reduce inflammation levels. What does that have to do with athletics? Well, running long distances like marathons and ultramarathons and triathlons and other endurance events places high demands on the body and can increase inflammation levels. Inflammation is common to almost all diseases, including cardiovascular disease, and causes arteries to stiffen and LDL cholesterol to increase. Research shows that those who exercise the most have the same risk of heart disease as those who are the most sedentary. And the reason I'm telling you that is not because exercise is bad for you. It means that physical activity needs to be supported by optimal nutrition. Long training sessions and endurance events can cause delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS, and stiffness in the tendons and ligaments, making them more prone to injury or rupture. Plant foods contain nitric oxide, which improves blood flow, which in turn improves recovery time. Furthermore, well-structured plant-based diets, which are low in fat, result in reduced blood viscosity. This improves blood flow and allows more oxygen to be delivered to muscles, improving both performance and recovery. The review also showed that athletes eating a plant-based diet increase their VO2 max, the maximum amount of oxygen they can utilize during an intense workout session or event, which also contributes to better performance as well. The review's lead authors were Dr. Neil Barnard and Dr. James Loomis, both of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Dr. Loomis is an internist, and he is head of the Barnard Clinic in Washington, D.C., which, if you happen to live in that area, these are wonderful doctors and dietitians and nurses and health professionals who have classes on how to adopt a healthy diet. I mean, there should be a clinic like this in every single city, in my opinion. But anyway, Dr. Loomis is an internist, and he has a lot of experience in sports medicine. At one time, he was the team internist for the St. Louis Rams football team. He says, quote, "When you're training for and running marathons or longer distances, you need to make sure your glycogen stores replete." Now, this is again where plant-based diets are going to be better for the repletion of glycogen. Glycogen is the storage form of glucose, and it's your body's backup source of energy, which you invariably use in an endurance event. Glycogen synthase is an enzyme that helps to store glycogen, and it peaks when glycogen stores are at their lowest at the end of a hard training session or an endurance event. And so thus, eating high carbohydrate plant foods shortly after exercise is the best way to restore glycogen. Your body really doesn't do very well with protein and fat in terms of restoring glycogen stores. Many well-known athletes like Scott Jurek and Brendan Brazier have reported improved performance as a result of adopting a plant-based diet, and a lot more athletes are doing this now. They're eating plant-based and even vegan diets. The biggest impediment, in my opinion, to more athletes adopting a healthier diet remains the belief that athletic performance depends on high protein intake and that the best protein is found in animal foods. I think it's not just common for athletes, but almost everybody who adopts a plant-based eating pattern for people to clutch their chest and become concerned for your welfare. Oh my gosh, where are you going to get your protein? It's amazing how people will facilitate and support your eating cheese pizza, French fries, and too many cocktails, but when you start eating vegetables and fruit and tubers and that sort of thing, they're very concerned for your welfare and figure they're going to be protein deficient, but that's really not the case. Carbohydrate is the preferred energy source for all human activity, and that includes athletics and high-intensity exercise and endurance activities. The availability of adequate carbohydrate actually helps to preserve muscle mass. While protein is very important for building and maintaining muscle mass, when you consume too much protein, at a certain point it starts to displace carbohydrate in the diet. And that way, what happens is the body is forced to make some type of compensatory adjustment because it requires glucose from carbohydrate in order to function. And one of the things that the body can and will do is it will burn protein for fuel, and some of this protein is taken from lean mass. So for people who are interested in building strong muscular bodies, at a certain point in time, the protein intake really starts to be counterproductive. Assuming that calorie intake is inadequate, athletes need about 15% of calories from protein. studies show that athletes often do not eat enough calories to support their activity levels and the growth and maintenance of tissue. So the problem is a deficiency of calories, not protein. When calories are adequate and people engage in similar levels of physical activity, higher protein intake does not make a difference. So, a couple of examples I'll give you. In one study, male endurance athletes were placed on 3 diets, each one for 3 weeks. Protein intake on the 3 diets was 7%, 14%, and 26%. The highest protein diet resulted in the highest rate of whole body protein breakdown. The researchers concluded that at lower protein intake, there's greater efficiency of protein utilization, and that protein intake as low as 10% of calories was adequate for endurance athletes. Interestingly enough, I thought this was ironic, the study was funded by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, which would benefit from a study showing that more protein is better. So I think they had a vested interest in showing the opposite of what the study actually showed. Another study compared 2 groups of men who participated in the same exercise program for 12 weeks. The difference was that one group consumed 17% of calories from protein, while the other consumed 35% of calories from protein. Both groups were successful in that they lost an average of 9% of their body weight and gained an average of 4% in lean mass. Both groups also showed similar improvement in strength and aerobic capacity, but the point is that twice the protein didn't improve the results because physical improvement was due to exercise. In other words, a muscular body is not built in the kitchen, it's developed in the gym. And I know that's sometimes not what people want to hear. I mean, if only you could just sit around and eat protein and end up looking great and being athletic, that would be terrific, but it just does not work that way. It's not necessary to protein load in order to succeed in athletics, and there are significant disadvantages of doing so. One is that consuming too much protein, as I mentioned earlier, displaces carbohydrate in the diet, and this results in the body using amino acids stored in muscle tissue, which can easily be converted to glucose for fuel. Adequate carbohydrate intake is both protein and muscle sparing. So the dietary protein can be used more for bodybuilding, and you will not break down muscle mass in order to have an adequate source of glucose and energy. Belief in the need for protein, which is not supported by research, has most likely reduced performance, caused injuries, and ended careers early for many athletes. There's an article that I wrote a long time ago, it's in the Health Brace Library, about the high cholesterol levels causing increased risk of ruptured tendons, including the Achilles tendon. So while athletes are protein loading and eating a lot of whey protein and animal protein and all this sort of thing because they think it's going to improve their performance, it actually can end their careers. Poorly structured, high protein diets, particularly those high in animal protein, cause significant health issues as well. These include increased risk of type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, and cancer. And of course, we all saw an example of that when Bob Harper, the trainer from Biggest Loser, who looked great on the outside, all that training and everything, but had a heart attack. This happens often. Alberto Salazar, I think is his name, was an Olympic runner and Olympic running coach who also had a heart attack, and he was one of the fastest runners in the world. So you can look great on the outside and still be destroying your body on the inside. The plant-based athlete, eating the higher carbohydrate diet, has better endurance, maintains more lean muscle mass, recovers more quickly, and has a lower risk of developing chronic diseases than his paleo high-protein counterpart. All right, that's all for today. As usual, if you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy watching it, and I will be back to you next week with more news.